Good evening, friends. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight, our topic of discussion is titled, it's called The Path to Liberation. And in tonight's session, we're going to invite ourselves to look into what is the progress that we have made and which path is that we have decided to walk this internal development. And we will walk out of here with an invitation to do an assessment on where is it that we find ourselves today. What is it? Where is it that we stand? Because the path that you have chosen may feel right, but how do you know that that path is real? I mean, maybe you are meditating. Maybe you pray intensely with devotion. Maybe you are fasting. Maybe you are combining all of these activities together. But are you awakening? Is your life really changing? Let's discuss tonight, why is it that many sincere seekers get stuck? And even when they think that they are indeed advancing. But to set a baseline amongst all of us, let's review the prophecy of Melchizedek. If you're not familiar with Melchizedek, let us say this. Our planet, like every other planet, is a mesocosmos. That means it is an order of worlds, but in this particular order of worlds, all things come to equalize and harmonize themselves. So our planet, like any other planet, it has a soul. And this soul is that of an enlightened superior being. And in esoteric studies, these superior beings are known as a genie. So these great masters, they are divine masters. They are intelligent forces that radiate the spiritual essence of cosmic bodies. And those bodies can be planets. Those bodies can be stars, they can be solar systems, they can be galaxies, they can be galaxy clusters, superclusters. They are the innate intelligence of what that body is. And in the case of the genii, these angelic beings, these planetary intelligence, they are entrusted with the evolution of specific forces within creation. And for our planet Earth, Melchizedek is the planetary intelligence of Earth. But besides that, Melchizedek is also a cosmic principle. He is also an enlightened master. At some point in his history, throughout the many different cosmic days, he was also in a similar situation that perhaps you and I find ourselves today. Meaning, not submerged within this misery and suffering, but working towards reintegrating the consciousness with the being itself. So for the root race to which you and I belong, this fifth root race, this seventh sub-race in this fifth root race, well, Melchizedek has already offered a final prophecy that explains the future of our race. Let me show you. Let me show you what Melchizedek says.
Men will forget their souls to care only for their bodies. The greatest of all corruptions will govern the earth. Men will be as ferocious beasts, thirsty for the blood of their brothers. The half moon will shut, and its adepts will fall into perpetual war. The greatest disgraces will fall upon them, and they will end up fighting against each other. The crowns of the kings, great and small, will fall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There will be a great war amongst all countries. The darkness will be thick and the tempests horrendous.
But the key here is that Melchizedek is saying, then I will send a group unknown until today, and they will guide the very few who remain faithful to the spirits of man in the battle against evil. Melchizedek speaks of a selected few who will settle in this new earth. A group of chosen ones that will go into a better place. I mean, this is a story that should sound very familiar to most people. To some degree, we have all heard, one way or another, about the need to transform. In some groups, that transformation is not stated as transformation, but it is referred to as repentance. So they say some of you must repent. And this implies that there has to be an internal work, a work of introspection where we are deliberately looking for something that is not right within. And once we find that we must make changes that will somehow make us worthy of being spared from some suffering that is going, and these actions are going to help us, are going to enable us into living a better life, a life that is referred to as an afterlife. Other groups don't speak of repentance. They speak about the ability to develop certain faculties and virtues so that they can become part of this rapture. Others refer to this transition as perhaps the resurrection of the dead. Others refer to it as the second coming of Jesus Christ. But in the esoteric traditions, this process of introspection, where we are deliberately looking within for something that must change, changes that will move us into a superior condition. This is what is known in the esoteric tradition as the process of self-realization. Self-realization is the one process where our spirit, the being, sends a fraction of its own human soul, which is our consciousness, the divine aspect that is today incarnated in you and in me. And the being will work that consciousness with the purpose of that consciousness gaining the necessary experience in these lower realms of creation to eventually make a progress such that it will rise into superior levels until it eventually reintegrates with itself, until the consciousness goes back and fuses once again with the source from which it emerged, and that is the way that it achieves self-realization. So for all purposes, self-realization is no such a thing as a vague idea. This is a precise initiatic process that has deep practical, psychological, and alchemical, we should say transformational, better to say alchemical implications. This is why for many centuries, traditions, schools, and spiritual institutions, they have been offering systems of distinct paths so that we can self-develop and we can achieve a degree of spiritual growth. And these paths, they are not mutually exclusive. They are complementary to each other. Some of you may have embraced the path of the ancient wisdom. And we find these paths of ancient wisdom in all of the Eastern schools. And one of these Eastern schools, of these Eastern traditions, is the teachings of Buddhism. Buddhism is a profound source of knowledge. Buddhism offers many keys to inner development. And within Buddhism, we find that there are two schools. One of them is called the Hinayana school, and the other one is called the Mahayana school. Hinayana means the lesser vehicle. The Hinayana school of Buddhism is the one that focuses on individual liberation. This one emphasizes discipline, meditation. It emphasizes personal effort. On the other hand, Mahayana Buddhism. This is the one known as the Great Vehicle. Mahayana Buddhism is the superior expression of the Buddhist teaching. It emphasizes not individual liberation, but universal liberation, and it expresses that through all of its sutras. It emphasizes compassion, it emphasizes wisdom acquired through lived experience. And within that great vehicle, we find the Vajrayana teachings. These teachings are very prominent in the Tibetan Buddhism. And the Vajrayana teachings, they are entirely tantric. Within the Mahayana Buddhism, this greater vehicle, we find the writings that are offered as that being the path of the Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva being the illuminated soul of a great being. And that path of the Bodhisattva is the path that the practitioner follows to awaken his consciousness, and as he achieves illumination, enable it to rise into superior levels of being until it eventually fuses once again with the source from which it emerged. And regardless of it being the Hinayana or the Mahayana school of Buddhism, well, the central teachings of Buddhism revolve around something that is known as the Noble Eightfold Path. These great teachings of Siddhartha Gautama speak about right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Certainly, there is so much to learn in these that we could dedicate our whole life just to go in deep understanding and comprehension of what each one of these elements of the Noble Eightfold Path is. But perhaps, if you did not go down the path of Buddhism, many of you may have embraced the path of yoga. And yoga derives itself from the Sanskrit yug, that means to join. It means to reunite. This is the same meaning of the word religion that comes from a Latin root word that is religare, that means bringing back together. But whether it is yoga or religion in their fundamental meaning, this process of reuniting is meant to be the process of self-realization. It is bringing back together the consciousness with the spirit, the consciousness and the being. Lamentably, as a humanity, we have become very selective on the things that we are willing to do and that we are not willing to do to achieve this self-realization. And in our ignorance, we have done this as if we, in this fallen state where we are today, where we have lost all of our superior faculties and senses and abilities, etc., as if we could make the call. Let me explain this. Yoga itself requires the integration of concepts that are all practical, physical, vital, emotional, mental, and volitional in nature. Let me show you 8 elements that are fundamental in yoga. For yoga to be a complete doctrine, it must offer education, teaching, practice in ethical observances. It must educate the practitioner on self-discipline. And as the practitioner becomes proficient, well-cemented in a foundation of ethical observance and self-discipline, they learn about physical postures, they learn to use breath to move energies, to help with transmutation. That discipline, that self-discipline that they learn moves them into a space where they can withdraw from the senses, achieve a deep state of concentration, and within that concentration, open themselves up to receive the wisdom that comes directly into the interior mind, which is that nexus that exists between the consciousness and the being itself. And thus, when that connection is present, boom, enlightenment, samadhi. If we were to speak in yogic terms, we would be speaking about yama, which are the ethical observances, niyama, that are the practices that lead to that self-discipline, asana, which are the comfortable postures, pranayama, breath control, transmutation, pratyahara, that is bringing the mind into a state of perceiving without projections. Dharana, deep concentration, dhyana, which is meditation, and samadhi or samadhi, ecstasy, that leads into that environment. But in yama, in these ethical observances, every sincere practitioner must learn about nonviolence. Nonviolence against themselves, against others. But because we have decided what we want to do and what we don't want to do, well, we would like to become enlightened, but we are okay when we day to day forget about ourselves and we encourage others to be angry, or we thrive within our own anger. Yama will ask for truthfulness. But in our current state of ignorance, well, we are okay with lies and deceit, of speaking half-truths. There must be an inner posture of respecting the property, the belongings of others, not stealing. But sometimes we even steal ideas without realizing. We steal time, we steal energy, we steal attention. Sometimes we steal opportunities. Here in the ethical observances of yoga, there is even a concept that is called brahmacharya. And brahmacharya speaks of moderation. It even goes beyond that, and it speaks of chastity. But today we find it difficult to not be indulging in our sexual desires. There are even teachings of non-possessiveness in these ethical observances. And this is just yama. As the practitioner goes deeper into yoga and they learn about niyama, they start learning about purity, about contentment, about austerity and self-discipline, about self-study, about surrendering themselves to the divine. For those of you who are familiar with all these practices, you know that is sausha, that is santosha, tapas, that is swarya, that is ishvara pranidhana. So all of this wisdom is part of these teachings of yoga. And if perhaps you did not go that direction, depending on what your ray of creation has been, as you have sought for these Eastern traditions and their deep and profound wisdom, maybe you have gravitated towards the teachings of Taoism. And there in Taoism, you may have already, or you at some point will receive the knowledge that is necessary to walk the narrow path. That narrow path, because they say that in this internal paths of transformation, well, the path is narrow and there is an abyss on both sides, and the practitioner must be very skillful. These teachings of Taoism, they will also encourage introspection. That introspection will happen through the exercise, the practice of meditation. And that meditation will seek to achieve a connection, we should say a reunion with the force of life. And that reunion manifesting itself through inner transformations and inner transmutation. And if you did not decide to follow yoga or Buddhism or Taoism, maybe what that internal longing did for you was move you to embrace Sufism. And Sufism is the esoteric, mystical dimension of Islam. Here in Sufism, we find dhikr, which is the remembrance of God. We find practices of mysticism. We find seeking guidance through a master. In Sufism, typically that master is a physical master that is there to guide you. So notice that in the context of any of these teachings, we find that the fundamentals are always the same. There is a remembrance of self that requires the purification of the heart. There is a path of initiated guidance that comes from a teacher, from a guru. And then there is inner transformation that will only happen through a willful and conscious effort. You see, there is no doubt that there are key elements that are common in all of these ancient doctrines. Again, there is a need to strengthen willpower. And in Gnosis, that willpower is called dilemma. There is work that must be done with the mind, where the mind must become disciplined enough that it can stop all of its projections and become a vehicle entirely passive and receptive. And of course, if there is work with willpower and there is work with the mind, there also must be work done with the emotion, seeking to achieve a very profound, solid emotional stability. Willpower, mind, emotion. These three elements, they are all required for self-realization. But there is so much to learn about willpower, about mind, about emotion, about wisdom, that in our ignorance, we have made of each one of these their own path. Georges Ivanovich Gurdjieff, he was a spiritual teacher who introduced the concept of the fourth way. The fourth way. And he stated that here in this fourth way, he offered a system that would be able to combine all of these paths. The path of the mind, of the emotion, of the willpower, of wisdom, into a method that was practical to awaken the consciousness in your everyday life. Gurdjieff, as he spoke about this, in the early 20th century, he emphasized the practice of self-observation, of looking within and facing those inner struggles, the importance of remembering oneself as ways to escape the mechanical nature of all human behavior. And in his teachings, those who came to him looking for wisdom, well, he challenged them to confront all of their illusions, transform their inner being through conscious effort and intentional suffering. So he spoke of a path of will. He spoke that there is a path of feeling, a path of knowledge, and of course, a path of the work. But when Samael comes as the avatar of this new age of Aquarius, he says something else. He says, if we analyze the four paths that Gurdjieff is speaking of, we can see that they are all reduced to one path. Let's understand what these four paths are. And let's do this with the purpose of shedding some light on this subject so that you can see what is it that you have chosen. Where is it that you are today? What progress have you been able to make? And let's start with what is known as the path of the Fakir. We start with this one because it's arbitrary. I mean, it does not matter, right? We're speaking about the path of the Fakir because some of us today, we have chosen to dedicate our lives to embrace suffering and to develop an internal fortitude, to embrace suffering in such a way that we can become unbreakable. And lamentably, this path of the Fakir, well, it can lead you to live a life of suffering, and you can end up living life suffering for the sake of suffering itself. Here, the practitioner focuses on superhuman efforts. And we see that as part of these superhuman efforts, they develop indeed a significant amount of willpower. I mean, there has to be, there has to exist tenacity, there has to be dedication, there has to be a commitment to this type of work. And as the Fakirs do this thing that they embrace to do, just like we do if we choose to embrace all of this suffering like this, they must overcome challenges and damage to their physical form. I mean, muscular hypertrophy, circulation problems, their muscles will become shortened and they become tight because of lack of use, and eventually the joints of the body will become stiff, immobile. Eventually we'll have to use no more willpower because simply that limb will not work anymore. And with that, They must endure all of the psychological stress that comes with that practice. But what is it that the masters tell us? They say, in the end, after countless efforts, after all of that going through life, the practitioner is going to develop a willpower that is going to be some good willpower. I mean, the development will be to a degree that it can be considered admirable, but nothing else. They still remain trapped in that body. They have consumed that life, developing that willpower, admirable nevertheless, but they do not develop the body of conscious willpower. A body that is necessary to exist within the causal plane of creation. So after all that suffering, after all of those countless efforts, the willpower they develop is indeed admirable, but nothing else. Then there are others who have chosen to dedicate their lives into developing the emotional aspects of their being. This is the path of feeling. Developing these emotional aspects of the being is called the path of the monk. And they will live their lives of deep devotion. They will live their lives in deep, profound prayer. They would dedicate much of themselves to service and serve others. They will strive to cultivate empathy. Some will even speak, it's a fact, about the superior degrees of development of their empathy and how great empaths they are. I mean, they will live a life of prayer, service, compassion, love. They will manage their emotions very effectively. They will be able to connect profoundly with others, with nature, with the universe. They will manifest these great abilities, even under the greatest duress and the most adverse circumstances. But what the masters tell us is that at the end, in the end, they will develop a superior emotion that can be deep, can be profound, capable of forming connections with the universe, with others at a very profound level, but their soul continues trapped within their body. Even after this life, they will still come back into this valley of suffering, as some masters refer to this realm of substance that we exist. And even when they meditate and can experience samadhi, that ecstasy that comes with meditation, the moment that exercise is complete, they must still return to the body itself. I mean, they can become visitors of those higher planes of consciousness. They may be able to visit consciously into the astral plane, into the mental plane. Perhaps they may pass across the doors of the causal plane. But they are only visitors because they do not develop the solar astral body. They cannot become a citizen of those higher realms of creation. And perhaps what you have chosen is to dedicate your life to move in this path of spiritual development, walking down the path of what is known the path of knowledge. This is the path of the yogi. This is acquisition of knowledge through practice. This is acquiring knowledge and transforming knowledge into wisdom through the practical application of this knowledge, but without yama, the ethical observances. But without niyama, the self-discipline, the progress that can be done in the path of the yogi is very limited. Because this path of the yogi has many different variations of this process of reunion. There are different types of yoga. Some of you may have embraced the path of hatha yoga, and you may have embraced this as a practice that is going to help you develop your willpower. Because after all, hatha means effort. So hatha yoga is the yoga of effort. And what you have found is that in hatha yoga, there are many postures that are very challenging. They are very difficult. They require a lot of concentration and they require a lot of sacrifice. You will learn about breathing. There is an element of meditation in Hatha. So there you will receive there the elements of asana, which are the postures, the pranayama, the transmutation, the meditation, seeking to escape the cage of the ego to connect with that divinity, to reunite. But Hatha Yoga has been disqualified by the Venerable Lodge of Masters. There is a tantric Hatha Yoga that has not been disqualified. But what they have stated, what these great masters have said, is that through these postures, through this breathing, through the meditation, that is not going to give you self-realization. But if it's not Hatha, some of you may have embraced then the path of devotion. And within this yogic path of devotion, we find Bhakti Yoga. And through Bhakti Yoga, you have been developing your inner emotional aspect. That love for the force of creation, that love for God. You have received and you practice mystical exercises, mystical practices. You seek to cultivate love. You may sing devotional songs. You may chant mantras, sacred words of power, prayers and worship to deities. So you may be involved in the practice of pujas or pujas. You may seek to surrender the ego, letting go of attachments, of desires, of fears, high devotion. All of this devotion that can give you a degree of illumination. But the Bhakti Yoga, within its abilities, cannot lead you to the intimate self-realization of the being. In this yogic path, there is also Jnana Yoga. And if you have embraced Jnana Yoga, then you're walking in the path of knowledge, of transforming knowledge into wisdom through practical application. Jnana Yoga is exceedingly powerful. It can help you emancipate your consciousness. That means you can abandon the ego and penetrate and experience the void. As you have that experience of samadhi and you find yourself within that space of no self, the experiences are greatly transformational. But that is still not self-realization. You will always have to come back into the physical body. And lamentably, some practitioners, even though they have experienced that emancipation of the ego, they will take those inner experiences, that, provided that they show a degree of mastery, because not everybody can do that. Well, but they will come back and consider themselves as if they had already achieved a state of inner perfection, forgetting that self-realization requires not the emancipation of the ego, but the elimination of the ego itself. So practitioners of Jnana Yoga or Jnana Yoga, though they may possess great wisdom, they will continue returning into the physical body in this life and into the next one as they come to receive a new vehicle so that they can continue the work. Jnana Yoga will invite you to strive to know yourself. It will give you practices of various disciplines of the mind. You will be able to work with inquiry, and as you ask questions, seek to comprehend, internalize, bring things into practice and experience. It will teach you how to discriminate between what is real, what is unreal, what is the temporal, what is eternal. It will encourage that investigation of your thoughts, of your feelings, your experiences. And as you do this, again, you can achieve samadhi, but that is not self-realization. And there's still more vertients of this, of yoga. There is Raha Yoga that brings about discipline, dedication, self-control. Raha Yoga is known as the royal path. I mean, the key elements behind Raha Yoga is meditation and deep concentration, and it requires patience and dedication and commitment to the spiritual practice. And it will move you down a path of achieving some development, but that is still not self-realization. And the yoga of fire, not the tantric Hatha Yoga, but the Agni Yoga, the one that is exoteric, that is public. This yoga of fire allows you to move some spiritual energy, talents, and abilities. These are then put to use to serve humanity. It encourages creativity, to make use of your creative energies, of those creative waters, and transform them in ways that are constructive. There's meditation. There's also Kundalini Yoga. But what the masters say is that this leads us then to the very gates of the fourth path. The fourth path that has something of the Fakir. It also has something of the Yogi. It also has something of the monk. But it is not like any one of these three. And this fourth path is the path of the equilibrated man. Remember, when we say man, we speak in generic terms. Of course, we mean all human beings. We don't speak just of males. Okay? This fourth path is the path of Gnosis. Gnosis is the sacred wisdom of all of the ancient mystery schools. As a matter of fact, Gnosis is the root wisdom of all the world's great religions. In Gnosis, we will find the same teachings of the ancient schools of Mithra, the ancient teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, of the great alchemists, the teachings of the Maya, of the Aztecs, of the great Mexicas. Gnosis is the very same teachings that the master of all masters, Jesus of Nazareth, came to give humanity. And within these teachings, we find something that is known as the key. As a matter of fact, Gurdjieff said, there is a key, the key to the ark of science. We have it. How did it come to us? It doesn't matter how it got here. Someone may have stolen it. It may have been given to us. It does not matter. The truth is that we have it. This it that Gurdjieff speaks of is what is known in Gnosis as the Great Secret. This key is known as the Great Arcanum. This is the key to the ark of science. And this Great Arcanum, based on what is known in the Eastern tradition, is Sa'aha Maituna. And it has a very specific method to it. Inserere membrum virile in vagina femina, sin ejectis the ens seminis. There must be an intimate connection, an intimate physical connection between the man and the woman without spilling the creative waters. The great Mario Rosso de Luna, who was a prolific writer, he wrote many books on many subjects that spoke of theosophy, of sexology. He was a journalist, he was a Freemason, he was an astrologer, he was even a strong advocate for women's rights and social justice back at the beginnings of the 20th century. This man, who is often referred to as the Red Magician of La Grosane, because of how much he dedicated himself to these occult and esoteric studies, he said, go directly towards Gnosis. Instead of remaining in the path of the monk, which is to develop that emotion, instead of staying in the path of the Fakir, that is just to develop the willpower, instead of staying in the path of the Yogi, that is seeking to integrate wisdom and knowledge and transform it into wisdom, move into this fourth path that contains a little bit of the path of the monk and the path of the Yogi and the path of the Fakir, and integrates all that. It has elements of all those, but it is not like any one of those paths. Go directly to Gnosis. And so we find ourselves at a crucial moment. We must deliberately assess what is it that we have done thus far with this inner spiritual development that we're seeking to manifest. I mean, we have to look sincerely within and remember all these things that we were told to expect. And based on that, realize in which path is it that I am today and where is it that I am on that path. Rosso de Luna says, go straight to Gnosis. Focus into that fourth path. And you may say, that's not for me. So if you say that that's not for you, that is okay. Some of you may be comfortable where you are today. You may be satisfied with your progress. And if that's your condition, that is okay too. But it is very likely that if you're here listening to this, that there's a magnetic center within you that is active. And you may be experiencing through the activity of that internal magnetic center, the fire of your being. And through that, a particular longing in your heart that is asking of you to exercise a radical transformation. You may be seeking a way right now to eliminate from within you all of those inferior aspects that exist so that you can see the birth of faculties, abilities, virtues, powers, laws, bodies, all of these things that together they make up what is known as the soul. If so, maybe these teachings of Gnosis, maybe they are for you. But maybe you are listening to this and you have already been in Gnosis for the last year. Maybe some of you, you're listening to this and maybe you have been doing this for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. So we must assess our inner state. We are living a crucial moment. Samael says, we must not spend existences playing the roles of fakirs, monks, and yogis. Not all human beings are able also to realize at this moment. And this is such a shocking statement. Not all human beings are prepared to be able to self-realize at this moment. And there are many reasons behind that. We are under the effect of this era of Kali Yuga, this iron age of humanity. It does not take much to look out the windows of our home and see how much chaos and suffering is out there, and in the same way, how much chaos and suffering is happening here within us. We find ourselves as part of a humanity that has very low willpower. We, for the most part, lack continuity of purpose. And we must also do something to regenerate the brain. There is a lot. So it is possible to find people who are not capable at this moment to self-realize. And so, there is an opportunity out there. Because we must examine ourselves. The self-examination will yield back a specific result. And we will know if we feel capable of treading this path or if we do not. Samael Weor as the avatar of the age of Aquarius. Not only he comes to tear the veil of mysteries, and he comes to offer specific work for those who, after deep and profound reflection, have realized that they are not capable of performing this work. He gives us an option. The alternative is not to just abandon the work and do nothing, but he gives us the option to seek illumination in two different ways. The first one is that the practitioner, if they feel that they're not able to do this, they can ask for some superior help that can lead them to cut through all of their limitations. And as they cut through those limitations, then they can penetrate into that great work of the key of the arc of science so that they can then become an illuminated being. There is also work that is being offered so that you can become illuminated, but as an elemental of nature. And by doing so, that you can then postpone the work of fabricating those superior existential bodies of the being, meaning the solar astral, the solar mental, the solar causal bodies, during the next race at the golden dawn of the existence of a future sixth race. Because right then and there, the conditions will be substantially much more favorable We're speaking about going back and doing this work at a time where the human beings are no longer going to be governed by a principle of nature that can take away your life at any given instant, which is a principle that governs the lives of animals. That is known as the Itoklanos principle. We would be under the influence of a superior principle that is known as the Fulanistanian principle that gives the humanity the ability to live 12 or 15 centuries, 1200, 1500 years in their physical forms. Living lives that will have such a long time span of existence and not be truncated at the most unexpected moment like we live today. That is a tremendous advantage. These people will have the opportunity to live at a time where the humanities will be governed by divine beings, as they have been governed before, in conditions where suffering and misery of the world do not exist. So these are the two ways. Work to cut through all of your fears and insecurities and defects and move on to work in the work of the arc of science, or move to work in the illumination of the ego, become illuminated but as an elemental, and postpone your work until the next great race. When Samael spoke about this, he said, if we do not feel capable of performing this work, just be honest. Be honest about it. Dissolve the ego. Wake up and then submerge yourselves within the bosom of the great reality until the future sixth root race, in which there will be a new golden age with favorable conditions. And as he gives us this information, he then comes to speak of bones and dupas. When we started this conversation, we started speaking about Buddhism and the vehicles within Buddhism, the lesser vehicle and the greater vehicle. See? And within that Buddhist tradition, we find bones and we find dupas. Let me show you what Blavatsky says about this in her Theosophical Dictionary. She says, dupas literally means red caps. This is a sect of Tibet. She says, before the advent of Tsongkhapa in the 14th century, the Tibetans, whose Buddhism, having been horribly corrupted by them, had been horribly adulterated by the doctrines of the ancient religions of the Bons, were all Dukpas. Since that century, however, and after the rigid laws imposed on the Yelupkas, the yellow caps, and the reform and purification of Buddhism, the Dukpas gave themselves over more than ever to sorcery, immortality, and debauchery. Since then, she continues, the word Dukpa has become synonymous with sorcerer, adept of black magic, and every vile thing. She says, in a word, Northern Buddhism in its purified metaphysical form is almost entirely unknown. The Dukpas, or Bons, the sect of the red caps, are held to be the most versed in sorcery. She says they inhabit Western Tibet, Little Tibet, and Bhutan. And she finishes by saying they are all tantrikas, people who practice the worst form of black magic. There's tantra and there are tantrikas, and those who are tantrikas, they use the forces that are moved during the exercise of the key of science, and they not only spill the cup of Hermes, but use those forces to strengthen the ego. But key behind the words of Blavatsky is her warning. She says tantrikas and she says red caps. The Dukpas identify themselves with the use of red caps. The Bons also use red caps, but the Bons also use a yellow cap. The Dukpas will not wear that yellow cap. These dark sorcerers, they practice again a tenebrous act during the sexual, a tenebrous magic during the sexual act. But as Blavatsky offers this information, when Samael comes and he tears the veil of mystery, he makes a clarification. And he says, Judiciously analyzing the issue, we show that bonds are not black magicians because they do not practice Black Tantra. He says, it seems that concerning the bonds, we must rectify because these bond priests are here and they can help those who feel that they are not capable of treading this narrow path. Again, they can help us in two ways. The first one is known as the work of the bond initiation. Those of you who believe that are not capable of performing this inner work, you can invoke of your being and you can ask of your being that if it is the will of the divine law to lead you to connect you to the work of the bonds. And after more preparation, the bond priest will submerge you into a practice that is known as the practice of cutting through. The name of this practice is Shod. Shod literally means to cut through. Cut through the ego, cut through your attachments, cut through your fears. And it is a practice that is part of the Mahayana school of Buddhism. Being part of the Mahayana school, this practice of Shod is specifically part of the Vajrayana traditions. What will happen here is that the individual, once accepted into this work, will be subjected to very rigorous tests. As part of these tests, what the practitioner will experience is that the priest will blow a trumpet that is made of a human bone, and the sound of that trumpet would be equivalent to what in the Kabbalistic tradition is the sound of the shofar. The sound of the shofar is referred to as the sound of God, as a sound that will invite some vibration within your organism, that it will help connect man to the higher realms of creation. And as that happens, the neophyte will be warned of dangers. All of the psychological egos of that practitioner will be invoked and they will be brought forward, and that bond priest will make them visible. And he will command those defects to devour the neophyte. The neophyte must remain serene. The one who goes through this ritual, they must remain calm, or they risk dying right there. But those who remain calm, those who have the ability of empowering the consciousness to perceive what those creations are, that are creations of the consciousness itself, they can, as they succeed, then they move on to receive what is known as the Tantra initiation. And once they receive that Tantra initiation, because that bond priest has helped them cut through all of those limitations, then they can start working with a spouse. They are given the key to the arc of science. They are told how to develop faculties, how to develop the powers. And then they must work actively on that until they reach the self-realization of the being. So this is one way in which you can propel the work forward. Again, the bonds are known for very violent practices. Practices that for many people, they're very scary. But those who are willing to be there and perceive in calmness, in serene reflection, they will succeed and then receive the Tantra initiation. But for those of you who feel that you are not capable of this work, what you then can do is that you can invoke your inner being. You can ask your being that if it is the will of the divine law to connect you into this stream of wisdom of the bond priests, and ask to become an elemental Buddha. If you're choosing to not do the work now and just leave this work till the beginnings of the next root race, then you have the option of embracing what Samuel is saying. Don't abandon the work. Eliminate the ego and become an illuminated elemental, an elemental Buddha. For you to become an elemental Buddha, as you become connected into this stream of wisdom of the bond priests. The bond priest will announce itself and will present itself in their official garments. They will be wearing an apron of skulls and bones, a red mitre, the face of a skull. They will have a dagger in the right hand. And that priest will teach the practitioner 2 words of power, 2 mantras that will immediately induce the death of the physical body. And once the angel of death does its work, severs the thread of Antakarana, and the soul cannot get back into the body, once out of the body, the bond priest will instruct the practitioner and will take that lunar soul and put that lunar soul through a series of ordeals, working with the Divine Mother until the ego is dissolved. And once that ego is dissolved and that consciousness is pure, then it can submerge itself within the bosom of the great reality. These are the options. Notice that the work is always with the Divine Mother. We can do it here and now with the practices of observation, comprehension, and elimination. Those of you who have a spouse who know about this key of science, you can work it through the great work and invoke of the fire of Kundalini to destroy and eliminate those egos that you have previously comprehended. You can also do it willingly with a bond priest, going through the exercise of cutting through. A violent practice, but a practice nevertheless. Or you can do it with a bond priest and see all of those defects eliminated through ordeals, engaging the work and the fire of your Divine Mother. You can do it willingly like that. Or the other option is to do nothing and eventually devolve into the inferior forms that lead into the paths of the 9 spheres of hell, where ultimately the 5th aspect of our Divine Mother is always going to take care of the defects. So either we can do it willfully or the Divine Mother will do it for us. So, Samael says, we have said that of those who enter the path upon reaching the 5th initiation of fire, for all those who then embrace of this key of the arc of science, as they start gaining wisdom, transmuting of these creative energies, crystallizing the superior existential bodies of the being, they will eventually reach a 5th initiation of great mysteries. That 5th initiation of fire presents them in the causal plane with the opportunity to walk the direct path or to embrace the spiral path. If we were to speak like the alchemists, we would stand before that fork on the road where on one side we have the wet path and on the other we have the dry path. The path of the Nirvanis is the wet path. That is the spiral path that takes all of those beings methodically into superior levels of being, assuming different responsibilities for different departments of nature. They become devas, gods of the elements. They govern specific sectors. They have specific roles within all of the economy of nature. But then there is also the direct path, which is known as the path to Sat, that unknowable thing. And that one is known as the dry path. For those of you who are here with us as advanced students, allow us to say that the alchemists assure that to carry out the work in the direct path, that is in the dry path, it takes only 8 days. And those who choose how to carry the great work in the wet path, they spend on that wet path 18 months. So dear friends, this is what we wanted to share with you. Our session tonight has been called The Path to Liberation. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and may all beings be happy.